The message crackled across the comms, so crisp and cold that it could freeze blood. "This is the Galactic Council," the voice boomed, echoing through every speaker across the solar system. "To the people of Earth, you will submit to our authority or face annihilation. You have 48 hours to comply. Refuse, and we will eradicate your civilization without hesitation." Earth's leaders sat in stunned silence. No one moved. No one spoke. The words hung heavy in the air like the sound of a death knell, each syllable laden with cold finality. No one, not even the most seasoned diplomats, had expected such a bold ultimatum. The Galactic Council, the self-proclaimed rulers of the galaxy, had never before dealt with a species as unpredictable as humanity. In all their millennia of conquest and manipulation, Earth had never been a part of their plans. Now, they had finally taken notice, and the consequences were unforgiving. Aboard the United Earth Defense Coalition's flagship, the resolute Ambassador Sarah Klein stood at the center of the conference room, staring at the holographic projection of the Council's emissary. The alien appeared humanoid, its face obscured by a ceremonial mask. The voice was calculated, stern, and devoid of any warmth. Klein's mind raced. Earth's fate hung in the balance, and the Council's decree could very well be the end of everything. A wave of tension rippled through the room. Around her, the faces of the highest-ranking officials, generals, and scientists were grim. Their silence spoke volumes. They all knew what this meant. The Galactic Council was not one to be ignored, and they had never once encountered a species that would dare stand up to them. But then, without warning, Klein's hand rose from the table, a signal to speak. The room fell into an eerie hush. She met the holographic projection's gaze, if it could even be called a gaze. "We refuse." Her voice was calm, yet every word cut through the atmosphere with a razor-sharp clarity. The Council's emissary was momentarily silent, perhaps taken aback by the sheer audacity of the statement. For a brief moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. The alien's masked face remained unreadable. The Council had never been refused before. Klein continued, her voice unwavering. "Humanity will not bow. We will not submit to your demands, and we will not bend the knee to an empire that thrives on fear and oppression." The words were not just defiance, they were a challenge. And the room felt it. She could see the flicker of surprise in the eyes of the diplomats surrounding her. They had expected negotiation, concessions, maybe even compromise. But not this. Not defiance. The Council had expected humans to quiver, to beg for mercy like every other species they had encountered. But Earth had something the Council had never truly anticipated: an unyielding will to survive. The people of Earth had been beaten, bruised, and broken time and again. Yet here they stood, ready to face their greatest challenge yet. And they would not yield. The alien emissary's voice broke the silence, and this time it carried an edge of barely concealed fury. "You misunderstand, human. The Galactic Council does not negotiate with inferior species. Your rejection is an act of war. If you do not comply within the next 48 hours, your entire species will be extinguished." Klein remained calm, her steely eyes fixed on the projection. "Then prepare for war," she said simply. The room erupted into a flurry of activity as the implications of the ambassador's words sank in. Officers rushed to their stations, alerting Earth's military forces. Engineers scrambled to fortify defenses. The United Earth Defense Coalition was mobilizing, and the countdown had begun. The diplomat turned to the gathering of Earth's most trusted military minds. General Marcus Drake, a veteran commander known for his ruthless pragmatism, stood at the front of the room, his eyes locked on Klein. "What's our next move?" "We wait," Klein replied, her voice steady as a mountain. "They'll come, and when they do, we'll show them why humanity doesn't bend." The tension in the room was palpable. Outside, the stars stretched across the endless void, oblivious to the storm that was brewing on Earth. Humanity's future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would face the Council not as supplicants, but as equals. The Galactic Empire had underestimated them, and that was a mistake they would soon regret. Earth had just sent its message, and the galaxy would feel the tremors. The moment the transmission ended, chaos erupted. The Galactic Council had issued its ultimatum. 48 hours. Earth had refused. Now the clock was ticking. But unlike the overwhelming fleets poised to strike, humanity's resolve did not waver. General Marcus Drake stood in the command center of the Resolute, watching as the lights dimmed and the control panels flickered to life. His jaw was clenched so tight it hurt, but his expression was one of steely determination. Behind him, the war room hummed with the urgency of an impending crisis. The Council had made its move, and Earth was about to meet them head-on. "General," a voice snapped, breaking his focus. Commander Lisa Reynolds, the lead strategist, stood at his side. Her normally composed demeanor was now edged with tension. "The enemy fleets are approaching at an alarming speed. They're only a few days out." Drake nodded, his mind racing through the countless variables. He had spent his entire career preparing for conflict, none of which, he realized now, had ever truly accounted for this. There was no rule book for facing the might of the Galactic Council, a collective of species with technology far beyond Earth's understanding. But there was one thing they hadn't counted on. Humanity was relentless. "They want to make an example of us," Drake muttered under his breath, "to remind the galaxy that no one refuses the Council and survives." Reynolds gave a terse nod. "And that's exactly what we're going to give them, a reminder. We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for every species that's ever been crushed beneath their boot." Drake's eyes locked on the tactical hologram of the solar system floating before him. The enemy's fleet was vast, dozens of ships large enough to wipe out Earth in one coordinated strike. But it wasn't the size of the enemy that worried him. It was their speed, their firepower, and the complete lack of mercy they had shown to countless other worlds. "We need a plan," Drake said, more to himself than anyone else. Reynolds stepped forward. "We have one, but it's risky as hell. We'll need all hands on deck to pull it off." "Then we'll make it work," Drake replied. His voice was grim, but there was a fire in his eyes. He wasn't about to let humanity fall without a fight. "We fight smart, we fight hard, and we fight together." The room went silent as the plan was laid out. It was a gamble, an unpredictable, desperate counterattack that might, if executed correctly, give Earth a fighting chance. The key was Earth's secret weapon, a cutting-edge, experimental technology that had been in development for years, kept hidden from the public eye. It wasn't perfect, but it was humanity's trump card. If they could deploy it, it could level the playing field. The only problem? It was unfinished, and they had no choice but to use it now. The Resolute's engines hummed as it powered up, setting course for the heart of Earth's defenses. Drake turned to face his officers, his expression hard. "Prepare for immediate deployment. Every ship, every soldier, this is it. We do not retreat. We do not surrender." As the fleet assembled, Drake couldn't help but feel the weight of what was about to happen. He knew the stakes were higher than anything humanity had ever faced. It wasn't just the end of Earth that hung in the balance. It was the future of the galaxy, the survival of countless species. This fight wasn't just about Earth. It was about defying an empire that had never known defeat. The warships in Earth's fleet were formidable, but they were far outclassed by the Council's might. The plan was simple, but it was dangerous. Draw the enemy's forces into a trap. Use the experimental weapon to create an opening for the Special Forces units to infiltrate and strike where the Council least expected it. As the ships prepared for combat, Drake knew that the odds were stacked against them. But he had one advantage that no alien fleet could ever predict. Humans didn't just fight to survive. They fought to win. "General," Reynolds said, cutting through his thoughts, "our ships are in position. The enemy is closing in." Drake took a deep breath, his mind focused. Time to show them what happens when you underestimate us. The first salvo was fired with terrifying precision. Explosions rocked the solar system as Earth's fleet engaged the Council's forces. But the real fight was just beginning. The battle raged in the vacuum of space, a violent clash of technology and willpower. Drake watched as Earth ships, smaller but far more agile, danced through enemy fire, using their speed and maneuverability to their advantage. But every ship that fell was a bitter reminder of how fragile their position was. Reynolds was in constant communication with the Special Forces units, guiding them to their targets. "We're in," she reported, her voice tight. "The team is on the ground. They've reached the command center." Drake gritted his teeth. The Council's forces were powerful, but humanity was playing a different game. This wasn't just about brute force. This was about tactics, precision, and a willingness to do whatever it took to survive. As the battle reached its climax, Drake stood at the helm of the Resolute, watching the outcome unfold. The trap had worked. Earth's fleet, though heavily outgunned, had managed to open a gap in the Council's lines. The experimental weapon had shifted the tide just enough for Earth's forces to strike with devastating effect. The Council's superiority was no longer certain. But the real question remained. Would it be enough? Drake's eyes never left the battle, his resolve unwavering. This fight was far from over. The first blow hit Earth's defenses like a thunderclap. The Council's warships, massive and terrifying, unleashed a barrage of energy weapons that sent shockwaves through Earth's atmosphere. A few cities had already gone dark, their lights snuffed out in an instant. And yet, amidst the devastation, humanity's resolve remained unshaken. General Marcus Drake stood at the command center of the Resolute, staring at the holographic map that flickered before him. The battle was far from over, but the cost had been steep. His ships were still engaged in a vicious dogfight with the Council's fleet, but the enemy was relentless. Earth's forces had been outnumbered from the start, and now it was clear. This would be a war unlike any the galaxy had seen. Drake's fists clenched as another explosion rattled the ship. The Resolute was holding its ground, but barely. The gap between Earth's fighters and the enemy's overwhelming firepower was closing fast. Yet amidst the chaos, a single thought rang clear in Drake's mind. They would fight. And they would fight until the last man stood. "General, we have a situation," came Commander Lisa Reynolds' voice over the comms. Her tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, something beneath the surface. "The Special Forces are reporting in. They've made contact with the Council's ground units, and they're holding their own." Drake nodded grimly. "What's the status of the experimental weapon?" "We've got one shot, General," Reynolds replied, her voice a bit tighter now. "If we use it, it could turn the tide. But it's untested. We don't know how the Council will respond." Drake paused, staring at the map. His mind raced through every possible outcome. If the weapon worked, it could decimate the Council's fleets. But if it failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. Yet there was no choice. They had to take the risk. "Deploy it," Drake ordered, his voice cold with determination. "We don't get another chance." Outside, Earth's skies were alive with fire. The experimental weapon, a sleek, devastatingly powerful satellite-based laser, powered up. It was humanity's last hope, a weapon designed not only to break through the Council's shields, but to destroy their ships in a single concentrated beam. It was the future of Earth's defense, but humanity had never tested it on such a scale. The risk was enormous. As the weapon charged, the battle escalated. Drake could feel the tension rising in the room, each moment heavier than the last. They were outgunned, outmanned, and in no position to negotiate. But this wasn't about negotiations anymore. This was about survival. This was about proving to the galaxy that humanity wasn't a species to be wiped out, erased, or controlled. The Council had thought they could break Earth with a single threat. Now, humanity was showing them just how wrong they were. The weapon fired. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The laser shot across the sky with a blinding brilliance, cutting through the darkness of space. The Council's flagship, the largest ship in their fleet, took the full brunt of the strike. Its shields flared brightly before crumpling under the force of the beam. And then, in a flash of raw power, the ship vanished, obliterated in an instant. The room fell silent. Drake's heart raced. The gamble had paid off, but the real battle was just beginning. The Council's forces would not retreat. They would retaliate with a fury none had ever witnessed before. But for the first time in this war, Drake felt a flicker of hope. General, Reynolds said, her voice tense. The enemy is regrouping. They're calling in reinforcements. Drake's mind snapped back into focus. The victory was hollow if it only bought them time. Earth had to strike fast, decisively, or risk being overwhelmed. Prepare for a counteroffensive, he ordered. All ships, all soldiers, this is our moment. We hit them hard. We don't give them a chance to recover. As the fleet maneuvered into position, the battlefield became a dance of destruction. Earth's ships moved with precision, using every advantage they could find, speed, agility, and the element of surprise. The Council had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. But in the back of his mind, Drake knew that no victory would come without sacrifice. He'd seen too many good men and women fall in battle, too many cities reduced to ashes, to believe the fight was over. The Council would not surrender easily. But humanity had shown them one thing: Earth would not bend. The fight for survival was far from finished, and humanity would face whatever came next with everything they had left. The Council had underestimated humanity's resolve. Now they would learn the true meaning of defiance. In the heart of the Resolute's command center, General Marcus Drake stood, his eyes fixed on the rapidly shifting tactical display. Earth's fleet had taken heavy casualties, but the tide of battle had shifted. The experimental weapon had made its mark, striking the Council's flagship and throwing their forces into disarray. But victory, as always, came with a price. The stakes were higher now, and Earth's forces were pushing their limits. "We've got their attention, General," Commander Lisa Reynolds said, her voice tinged with something between relief and disbelief. "They're pulling back, but they're preparing for something big. Reinforcements are on the way." Drake nodded grimly. "That was only the first wave. We can't afford to let them regroup. We need to hit them hard now." He turned, watching the officers and strategists around him spring into action. The battle was far from over, but one thing was clear: Earth was in the fight for the long haul. And this war was no longer just about survival. It was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. "General," came a voice from the comms, cutting through the tension. It was Ambassador Sarah Klein, who had been working tirelessly to rally diplomatic support for Earth's cause. "The message is ready. We can broadcast it across the galaxy, straight to the Council and all their allies." Drake's eyes narrowed. What message? Klein's voice was steady, but there was an underlying fire in her words. The truth. The Council's corruption. Their manipulation of every species they've conquered. "I've just received confirmation from our intelligence. More than half the galaxy's races want to see the Council fall. This is our chance to expose them." Drake's thoughts raced. Exposing the Council's dark dealings would shift the balance of power, no doubt, but it was a risk. The Council would retaliate with even more ferocity. But the alternative, surrendering, was worse. If Earth fell, so would every other species under the Council's thumb. "Do it," Drake said. His voice was low but resolute. "We've made our stand. Let the galaxy hear it." As the transmission began, Klein's words echoed through the galaxy, cutting through the void like a sharpened blade. "To the Galactic Council and to every species under their yoke, we refuse to be controlled. Earth will not bow. You've subjugated countless worlds, manipulating them through fear and deceit. But no longer. We stand for freedom. We stand for survival. And we will fight until every last one of us is free." The words hung in the air, carried by the most powerful broadcasting systems known to humanity. They rippled outward, reaching every corner of the galaxy. For the first time, a species was daring to challenge the Council's might with not just arms, but with the truth. Drake could almost feel the weight of the moment. The Council's grip on the galaxy was vast, their influence immeasurable. But now, cracks were beginning to form. Their power, once unchallenged, was beginning to show signs of strain. For the first time in centuries, the oppressed were speaking up. And humanity, it seemed, was leading the charge. Back on the Resolute, Drake and his team waited, eyes fixed on the screen. The Council's response came swiftly, too swiftly. The holographic image of the Council's emissary materialized before them, its stern, masked face betraying no emotion. But there was a quiet fury in the air, palpable even through the cold transmission. "You are fools," the emissary spat, its voice low and menacing. "Do you truly think the galaxy will rally to your cause? You are nothing more than a rebellious child, throwing stones at a giant. We will crush you, Earth. And when you are gone, your message will be nothing more than a forgotten whisper." Klein stepped forward, her eyes locked on the projection. "We may be small, but we are far from powerless. You underestimate us, as you have so many others. The galaxy is waking up. You will not rule through fear any longer." The emissary's expression remained hidden, but the fury in its voice was unmistakable. "You will regret this. The Council does not forgive betrayal." With that, the transmission ended, leaving the room in a heavy silence. The Council's threat hung in the air, but there was a shift. The Council's once unshakable confidence had faltered, and for the first time it was clear that they had no idea how to respond. Reynolds turned to Drake. "They'll come for us, and they'll come for everyone who stands with us." Drake's jaw clenched. "Let them. We've opened the door, and now we'll show the galaxy what it means to stand up to tyranny." The stakes were higher than ever. The Council's response would be swift and brutal, but humanity had just given the galaxy a choice. And that choice was clear. Continue to live under the boot of an empire that had no regard for freedom, or stand with Earth and fight for a future where the voice of every species could be heard. As Earth's fleet readied for the next wave of battle, Drake knew one thing: the war had only just begun. And this time, humanity wasn't backing down. The first crack appeared, and it spread like wildfire. Within hours of Earth's broadcast, the ripple effect was felt across the galaxy. The Galactic Council, once an impenetrable force, found itself scrambling, unable to contain the wave of dissent that had been unleashed. Messages of support for Earth flooded in from countless systems, some covert, some open, all united by one simple truth: the Council's reign was built on fear, and now they were afraid. General Marcus Drake stood at the Resolute's command center, staring at the shifting tactical map. The once unified front of the Council was fracturing. Ships from neutral factions, previously hesitant to pick a side, now circled the edges of Earth's fleet, watching closely. And though many were still hesitant, one thing was clear: Earth had sparked something. Hope. "General," Commander Lisa Reynolds said, her voice cutting through the tension, "we've received transmissions from several systems that are ready to join us. They're asking for help, ready to rise up against the Council." Drake didn't move, his mind processing the implications. The Council's empire was built on subjugation, each species kept in check with threats in force. Now, the entire galaxy was watching Earth. The Council's iron grip was slipping, and the oppressed were seizing the chance to rise. It was a dangerous moment. The Council would retaliate with everything it had. But in that moment, Drake felt something he hadn't in years: a spark of possibility. "Get their coordinates," Drake ordered, his voice hard. "We can't waste time. If they're ready to act, we need to help them. We don't just fight for Earth anymore. We fight for the galaxy." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Earth had ignited a rebellion, but it wasn't just Earth's battle anymore. The oppressed had found their voice, and they were eager to be heard. But the Council was not going to let this go without a fight. Back in the war room, Reynolds was working furiously at her station. "General, the Council has issued a galactic-wide order. All ships are to converge on Earth. The message is clear: they intend to make an example of us." Drake's fist slammed against the table. "They think they can crush us with brute force. We've seen their fleets. But we have something they don't: unity, and the will to fight back." The holographic projection of Earth's fleet flickered before him, a stark contrast to the hundreds of enemy warships that surrounded them. Earth's forces had taken heavy casualties, but they weren't backing down. And now the galaxy was watching. "All ships, all units, prepare for counteroffensive," Drake barked. "We're not waiting for them to come to us. We hit them before they have the chance to regroup." His orders were swift and precise. As the fleet prepared for battle, Reynolds turned to him with a questioning look. "And the message, General? Do we broadcast it again?" Drake's eyes narrowed. We broadcast it, yes. But this time, we show them what we can do. We show them that no empire is invincible. We are no longer the underdog. We are the force that will reshape this galaxy. As the countdown to battle began, the truth was undeniable. The galaxy was no longer united under the Council's banner. There were cracks in the facade, and those cracks were growing wider with each passing minute. Earth had struck the first blow, and now it wasn't just about survival. It was about reshaping the future. The Resolute's engines hummed to life as the fleet prepared to move out. Ships of all sizes began to align with Earth's fleet. Ships that had once been neutral, now bearing their colors proudly, ready to fight. Earth had become a symbol not just of resistance, but of hope. And in the dark void of space, that was a power the Council could no longer ignore. Drake stood tall, watching as the ships formed ranks, ready to face down the overwhelming might of the Council. The battle ahead would be brutal. But this time, it wasn't just Earth's forces holding the line. The galaxy had risen. And in that moment, the stakes were clear. This was no longer a war for Earth's survival. It was a war for the future of the galaxy. And they would either stand together or fall one by one. Earth had sent its message. Now, the galaxy would answer. The battle was on the brink of chaos. For hours, the sky above Earth had been a battleground, a swirling mass of fire and destruction as the fleets clashed in the void of space. The Galactic Councils might seem insurmountable, but humanity, with its ragtag fleet and unyielding resolve, had held its ground. Ships burned and shattered in the cold vacuum, but Earth had proven its worth. And now, as the final push loomed, humanity had one chance to do what no one had ever dared: defeat the Council once and for all. General Marcus Drake stood at the helm of the Resolute, his eyes locked on the chaos unfolding before him. The Council's reinforcements had arrived in full force, massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed Earth ships, their weapons capable of wiping entire fleets from existence. But Earth wasn't backing down. They had one advantage that the Council could never have predicted. The galaxy was beginning to turn. Drake glanced at his crew, all of them battle-worn but resolute. Commander Lisa Reynolds was at his side, eyes scanning the tactical displays, her fingers flying over the control panel. The battle had reached its peak, and their forces were strained, but the outcome was within reach. "We need to push them back now," Reynolds said, her voice steady but urgent. Drake nodded, his mind calculating every move. Earth had been cornered for too long, but now they had become the storm. The Council, once so certain of their dominance, was faltering. Too many factions were starting to defect. Too many species were joining the fight. The message had spread across the galaxy, and it had struck a nerve. The Council had always ruled by fear, but fear was no match for unity. "Prepare the final offensive," Drake ordered. "We hit them where it hurts, their command ships. If we take out their leadership, the fleet will crumble." The tactical hologram displayed the layout of the enemy forces. The plan was simple but deadly. Earth's forces would use their speed and agility to target the Council's command ships, the very core of their operation. Without their leaders, the rest of the fleet would fall apart. It was a high-risk move, but it was the only way to win. The Resolute and its accompanying ships broke formation, darting toward the heart of the enemy fleet. The Council ships fired relentlessly, but Earth's fleet weaved through the chaos, dodging plasma blasts and returning fire with precision. Every ship was a testament to human ingenuity and bravery, each strike a statement of defiance. Reynolds' voice cut through the comms again. "We're almost there, General. The command ships are within range." "Stay focused," Drake replied, his voice unwavering. "This is our moment." As they closed in on their targets, a final, desperate barrage from the Council's fleet slammed into the Resolute, shaking the ship to its core. Alarms blared and the hull groaned, but they held steady. Drake could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was the turning point. Everything, every sacrifice, had led to this. "We're in position," Reynolds reported, her voice sharp. Drake took a breath. "Do it." The experimental weapon, a final trump card humanity had kept hidden until now, powered up. The massive energy cannon charged, its hum growing louder as it gathered the strength to fire. The weapon released a single, devastating beam that shot through the void, ripping through the heart of the Council's flagship. The ship disintegrated in an instant, its vast structure reduced to nothing more than debris in the cold expanse of space. The shockwave rippled through the rest of the fleet, sending the enemy ships into disarray. Without their leader, the remaining ships faltered. Some attempted to flee, others scattered, and the once imposing might of the Council's forces was shattered in an instant. Drake exhaled, feeling the tension leave his body. The battle was won, but the war was just beginning. As Earth's fleet regrouped, the galaxy watched in stunned silence. The Galactic Council, once unchallenged and all-powerful, had been brought to its knees. It wasn't just Earth's victory, it was the galaxy's. The oppressed, the silenced, and the broken had risen together, united in their defiance. And now they had a new purpose: to rebuild, to stand together, and to ensure that no empire would ever again seek to rule through fear. Drake turned to his crew, a grim smile crossing his face. It's over, but the real work starts now. The future of the galaxy was uncertain, but for the first time, it was theirs to shape. And humanity, standing at the forefront of a new era, would lead the way.